fear. Fear murdered my parents. On the far side of the world, I tasted fear in its purest form and thought I had conquered it. But fear followed me home.
Batman Begins is my favorite of the Batman franchise and arguably my favorite superhero movie overall. Begins was one of the first examples I can think of a superhero movie that could easily stand on its own from both the perspective of a comic book fan and from the perspective of someone that's just looking for a very good movie. Both with its story, themes, and cinematography, it has more meat on the bone than many of the prior attempts of making a Batman film have. For some context of its history, Batman and Robin dropped in 1997 with the fallout lingering for many years after that. On impact, Batman and Robin killed the proposed follow-up, which was set to start filming later in the year of its release. Ideas came and went afterwards, like a strange Aronofsky adaptation of Batman Year One, or the ever-lingering Batman Beyond idea that has still been kicking around Hollywood for a while now. The only thing that resulted from many of these trials and errors ended up being Halle Berry's Catwoman film, and I feel like if you're watching this, you most likely know how that movie ended up turning out. Begins was the thing to emerge from all this rubble and arguably helped set the table for the next wave of superhero movies later on in the 2000s and into the 2010s. Begins, like the following two Nolan Batman movies, focus on a couple of central themes. For example, The Dark Knight focuses a lot on order and chaos. Rises focuses on things like pain and purpose. Begins centers mostly around fear and justice. The fear is definitely the more obvious of the two. Fear is both represented with the story, characters, and even the setting. As I mentioned in my Gotham City adaptation video, the Gotham in Batman Begins is just drowning in atmosphere and character. Like many other Batman movies, it does use Chicago as the skeleton that it builds upon, but specifically additions in this are the Narrows and Arkham Asylum. The Narrows was filmed on a soundstage and visually inspired by the walled city of Kowloon in China. The streets are very cramped, buildings are on top of buildings. Between all of them, there are plenty of laundry lines, power lines. No matter where you are, there's always something taking up space in the area and really closing in on the camera, making you feel a sense of claustrophobia and maybe a little bit of paranoia, depending on where you are. It also is constantly shot at night, and a good chunk of the scenes that we see there are either covered in some elemental force of some kind, be it rain or be it fog. There's always something that is in the way of having clear visuals in this area. Adding to that sense of dread, Arkham Asylum is also located right on the same island as the Narrows, so you have this creepy building that's looming over the entire neighborhood throughout the movie. A lot of this is presented with a strong sense of dichotomy. You have areas like the Asylum and all of the Narrows contrasted with locations like the place where Falcone is introduced, or big locations like Wayne Manor or even the Wayne Enterprise building. One of the first shots we see of it is on a nice sunny day. Same thing with Wayne Manor. It's presented as this big castle-like structure in the middle of an open area. So it really is showing the drastic differences between the two. As far as fear's connections to the characters, the use of fear and how it's portrayed in the film between the villains and Batman is sort of like a food chain, in my opinion. At the bottom of the food chain, you have the manipulators with the likes of Falcone and Crane. Falcone uses money, resources, and connections to control the underworld, and uses its power to either intimidate or stomp out his enemies. Or potential enemies. On the flip side of things, he also tries to put on a face of civility or class. Bruce is introduced to him in a very fine dining environment, and he's wearing, of course, a nice suit. His encounter with Batman, meanwhile, strips him of this and literally brings him out from the seedy underbelly into the light. Moving up on the food chain, there is Jonathan Crane, and when the two have their interactions, it's a great example of this food chain metaphor in action, in my opinion. Within their first interaction, they're relatively on equal ground, considering where they both are at that point in the film. They do try and take a few jabs at each other, but Scarecrow does have a bit of an ace up his sleeve that kind of causes Falcone to back down a little bit.
But you know who I'm working for. And when he gets here...
He's coming to Gotham?
Yes, he is. And when he gets here, he's not going to want to hear that you have endangered our operation just to get your thugs out of a little jail time.
Meanwhile, in the second interaction, Falcone once again does try having some jabs at Jonathan Crane, but it does not end up working out for him. In this situation, he's taken completely out of his element and is sitting right in the middle of Crane's. Regardless of that, Falcone's pride does blind him from this detail. At this point, he believes he does have some leverage over Jonathan and even does try to use some similar strategies that he used on Bruce in the restaurant. The mention of having connections, this being his town, plus some good old blackmail.
That'll be true.
What do you want?
I want to know how you're going to convince me to keep my mouth shut.
About what? You don't know anything.
I know you don't want the cops to take a closer look at the drugs they seized. I know about your experiments with the inmates of your nut house. See, I don't go into business with a guy without finding out his dirty secrets. You know, those goons you used, I own the muscle in this town.
However, unlike in the restaurant, Crane is the one holding all the cards in this situation. Both as a public official in this environment and in their crime scheme, he is higher up on the totem pole. And unlike Bruce during the restaurant interaction, Crane here has a card to play that can completely end the game of cat and mouse.
Would you like to see my mask?
Similar to Falcone, Crane does use fear as a means of manipulation, be it manipulating people in the public into thinking his patients are insane so he can run more tests, him threatening Falcone with Roz in both of their interactions, or when he tries to get Rachel's boss to put her in place during the first interaction that they have together.
Miss Dawes.
You really think a man who butchers people for the mob doesn't belong in jail?
Well, I would hardly have testified to that otherwise, would I, Miss Dawes?
This is the third of Carmine Falcone's thugs you've had declared insane and moved into your asylum.
Well, the work offered by organized crime must have an attraction to the insane.
Or the corrupt.
Mr. Finch, I think you should check with Miss Dawes here just what implications your office has authorized her to make, if any.
Unlike everybody in this food chain, though, who use fear solely as a tool, Crane, in his limited screen time, does express a more deep interest in the intricate aspects of fear and how it can cause people to act. The Scarecrow persona, of course, playing into this. The Scarecrow as a persona is very similar to how Bruce is like with Batman in a way. Both don the identity to further their goals, while their daytime persona just won't cut it in the situation that they're in, or in the situation that they're trying to fight against. At the top of this food chain metaphor, there is, of course, Batman himself, or Bruce Wayne, and Ra's al Ghul. This is also where the themes of justice really start to lay in thick in the movie. Like everyone else on the food chain, they also have two personas of sorts, the more public-facing one with the degree of social power, and the other being a vigilante who controls fear to carry out their brand of justice. Or at least Ra's was vigilante prior to his current position, but still executing a form of justice is the goal for him. Unlike the lower members on the food chain, though, Bruce's use of fear is both a motivation for his cause and as a tactic during his crusade. The origin of Batman in this trilogy is caused by Bruce wanting to leave the opera because of his fear of bats. Not being afraid is also the last piece of advice that Bruce's dad gives him. Fear from the economic crash at the time is what caused Joe Chill to turn to crime, so all of Bruce Wayne's origin is connected to fear in some aspect. Bruce blames himself for their murders and is put on track to fight against the corrupt society that created a world like the one that both killed his parents and caused Joe Chill to do that. His biggest leap in this journey is when Ra's al Ghul teaches him how to conquer his fear and channel it into a weapon. Unlike those lower on the food chain here, Bruce manipulates fear in much more of a primal sense than the other two. The other two use fear in the realm of a more modern society aspect of things. They try to use bureaucratic ways to help push someone out, or they try to use money and influence as a way to make someone scared, where Bruce is more in line with the slasher villain in his first appearance as Batman to both the audience and the criminal world. Same strategy as your normal Arkham Predator map, pick off the enemies one by one, making them more erratic, cause more mistakes. A nice touch in this first appearance is Batman is obscured from the audience as well, so we don't really get a clear look of this thing that's taking out these people one by one until we get a clear look at him when Falcone faces him and delivers him justice. It's tactics that help him become what Ra's proposed in their first meeting, a legend, a symbol.
That's frightened me. This time my enemies shared my dread.
Another difference between Bruce and the lower two on the food chain is Bruce doesn't really need a specific environment or a set of circumstances to manipulate the fear of his opponents. He either endures with how it is or changes the environment to his advantage. Like Selina Kyle later on in the trilogy, Bruce is adaptable. Al Ghul's use of fear in this is similar to how Bruce is, but on a less primal level and more of a means to an end type situation. Ra's al Ghul's use of fear highlights how it can be used as a destructive accelerant. The other two antagonists in this movie are more focused on dealing with individuals using fear on a more one-to-one basis than anything. Ra's is more interested in utilizing it on a more macro scale. Like Bruce, fear is being used to carry out a certain brand of justice, be it using fear that comes along with an economic depression like he reveals to Bruce, or using fear and hysteria to destroy and level a city to just start all over again. As far as how they both view justice, Ra's al Ghul is a reflection of what Bruce could be. Both have somewhat similar goals, wanting to take on corrupt societies and start something new from there. In the case for both of them, the corrupt society that they endured is what sent them on the path that they currently are on now. They both want to save Gotham, but the difference is in exactly how they do it, and where they draw the line regarding who can be saved and who deserves to be saved.
Gotham isn't beyond saving. Give me more time. There are good people here.
You are defending a city so corrupt we have infiltrated every level of its infrastructure. This man is a murderer.
This man should be tried.
By whom? Corrupt bureaucrats? Criminals mock society's laws. You know this better than most.
The initial separation is when Bruce is asked to be something he is not, an executioner. A point that Ra's hammers home throughout the movie is the necessity of what needs to be done.
You cannot lead this man unless you are prepared to do what is necessary to defeat evil.
Anger does not change the fact that your father failed to act. The will to act.
You finally learn to do what is necessary.
Ra's at this point in his life is about going literally scorched earth on his problems, where Bruce wants to take the lessons that he learned from Ra's about being a symbol and applying that to something that people can rally behind and cause some sort of a change. Overall, I think it's very impressive how this theme is carried between all these characters despite the imbalance of screen time that they all have. Despite the limited amount of time that they all have, they are ever looming throughout the points of the movie that they exist in, and I really admire that about the film. And like I said earlier on, each of the Nolan Batman films focus on a couple of central themes like Begins does, so if you want one on The Dark Knight, let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and all the other fun algorithm boosting things. I want to thank you for watching the video all the way up to here if you have, and I will catch you guys in the next video.